If you can understand where it started and you can understand what it is, now you get to change it. Because the beautiful thing, we have the opportunity to change our beliefs. We have the ability to change how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we see the world around us. We get to choose those things.
This is Transform You. Unfiltered ideas from global thought leaders to transform your life, elevate your career, and give shape to the person you were always meant to be. Here's your host, Nick J. Murphy.
Hey there, my friend, and welcome to Transform You, the show that helps you close the gap between where you are and where you want to be in your life, your business, and your career. My name is Nick Murphy. I'm your host. Thanks for being here. You listened to episode 51. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you're a frequent listener, you know I love you. If you're a new listener, go ahead and press subscribe, whatever app it is that you're listening to the show on right now, to make sure that you never miss an episode. We put out 2 episodes a week. One is a long-form interview, one like you'll hear here in just a couple of minutes, and another one is a mini-sode, where it's kind of my thoughts on a specific topic for the week, a little bit of homework, and just a little bit of daily, or weekly rather, inspiration to keep you on track and help you make the impacts and changes and get where you want to be in your own life, business, or career. If you haven't yet read or listened to my new book, Unboxed, an unfiltered guide to creating a career on your terms, I'm making it really easy to get the free, 100% free audiobook. All you got to do is text Unboxed Book to 44222. Unboxed Book. It's got to be all one word. The software won't recognize it if you allow the autocorrect to kind of put the space between Unboxed and Book, and you would receive nothing, and that would be sad. So, Unboxed Book, all one word, to 44222, and I will personally deliver you your very own MP3 file of my best-selling book. My guest today is Nicole Jansen, and in our conversation, Nicole and I discussed the 3 things to dig yourself out of a funk, how entrepreneurship is a mindset, and how transforming our beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world around us makes us happier, more productive people. As always, there's a ton to cover, so let's get right into it. My guest today is Nicole Jansen. Over the past 30 years, Nicole has empowered thousands of people to transform their lives and achieve extraordinary results while making lasting impact through their business or chosen profession. She's a human behavior specialist, business breakthrough coach, and founder of Discover the Edge and the Leaders of Transformation. Nicole, how are you? Good to have you.
I'm glad to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to share today.
Awesome. I want to get into your story. There's so much that I want to cover. One of the things that wasn't in your bio that's a recent new project that I want you to talk about is you co-authored a book called Power Up Superwomen. Tell us about that.
A friend of mine, Dominic Damaski, came to me last summer and said, hey, would you like to be part of this women's empowerment project that I'm putting together? And when he shared with me the vision for it, I said, absolutely. And so I wrote a chapter in a book called Power Up Superwomen. My chapter is called Worthiness from Within. And the book is really about, stories of courage and empowerment. Each one of the authors, we share our story. We share some of our greatest struggles, what we learned, how we got through it, and being on the other side, what we learned, and now what we teach others. And so it's been a really great opportunity. It's also been a great opportunity for me to share a side that, being a business coach, I do it one-on-one with my clients, but in a lot of my marketing and so forth, I hadn't really been sharing some of those stories. There's so many stories. I mean, I've been in business for over 30 years. There's lots of stories. And this is one that I haven't really shared that much about. And so I get to do that in this book.
No, I love that. That's exciting. And at the risk of seeming like a shrink and saying, tell me about your childhood, one of the things you mentioned in the book, kind of the onus for your chapter, is what you've termed the primary lie that we learn as children. I want to get into that story and let you kind of elaborate on it and the lessons and kind of take it where you want to take it, but just apply it to the lens of entrepreneurship or career professionals. Because so much of who we are the things that we absorb and the conditioned beliefs that we attain or that get to us through osmosis through our environment. So I really want to dig into that and just kind of the power of mindset and how that shapes not only who we are and the things that we deal with, pros and cons, but also how it affects our careers.
So this book was designed to be more of a personal empowerment book, but it absolutely, all of it applies to business, and we're all business women. So yeah, in terms of my childhood, I actually had a really good childhood. I mean, my parents loved me dearly. I have one sibling, my brother. We were very close. The rest of the family was all in Europe. So it was the 4 of us. We did everything together. Really great childhood. In school, I was just naturally really good at school. I was good at sports. I was good at music. So pretty much everything I did, it just came really effortlessly. And I was an introvert. So it wasn't like I was bragging about it and saying, look at me, look how great I am or anything. But my friends started to resent that because I would just go out, no, I want to do this. And so I would do it. Particularly, it showed up in sports because they wanted to fool around and goof off and so forth. And if we were running a race, I wanted to win the race. So that was what I was like, let's go do that. Right. So, and I love to run. So that created a situation where they started to bully me. Actually my closest friends, my two closest friends would actually turn people, the rest of the kids on, against me to try to get at me. Between my parents being entrepreneurs, working very hard, loving me very much, and we did everything together, but they were also very busy and couldn't come to my events, like sports events or anything like that. And then my friends, not being able to trust them, some of the things that I learned, and I believe we all have a primary lie, which we learn, and there's like the root lie, and then there's all these branches that come off of it. But for me, it was that I'm not important. I'm not important enough, and I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of attention. People can't be trusted. If it is to be, it's up to me. So these are some of the branches that came off of that. So fast forward, I started helping my parents when they got involved in a network marketing business when I was 7. My dad owned garage businesses before then, so always being entrepreneurial. My mother worked and helped him in the business. But I started working with my parents and it was great because now I got the opportunity to spend with them and I was doing something meaningful. I was getting that need for significance and being important, getting that met. We became very successful in that business. I had my own business, but also helping them in their business. Later on, I ended up partnering with them and everything seemed to be good, except that business ended up falling apart that's a whole other podcast and other reasons. I was devastated. We were all devastated, but then I was like, okay, I need to move on. And so long story short, fast forward, here I'm, achieving, I'm trying to create a life and I get married. As I said, I talk about this in my chapter, is that my husband decides he doesn't want to be with me anymore. And at that point, there were so many things, I kind of fast forwarded through a bunch of it, but there were so many things that had happened. And here I am. And I think, I finally have gotten what I've wanted, right? I've got I'm married the man of my dreams. I've got a business. I've got my health now. And I've got all these things and it's just, life is good. And then it started to fall apart. And I thought, well, what did I do to deserve this? Right. And all of the feelings of unworthiness started to came to the surface. And so I had to go through a whole process of really digging deep and realizing. So actually it was a gift for me. I didn't get bitter. I actually, as the cliche says, I didn't get bitter, I got better, is I looked at it and said, okay, so this is an opportunity for me to see something in myself that I have not yet looked at. 30 years of personal development hadn't prepared me for this, or I hadn't been willing to over those years to look at this piece of my life. And so I had the opportunity to do that and spent quite a bit of time just personally working through some things. And really what I teach now, even though I work with entrepreneurs and business leaders and, helping them build better teams, increase their sales, their performance, profitability, all those things, that's great. But when it comes right down to it, what I teach is on a level of, mindset and how do you see yourself? How do you see others? How do you see the world around you? And so in this chapter, I actually describe what I did to get myself out of that funk and to build my worthiness from within. And I talk about 3 ways that I do that, which we can talk about here if you want to. But yeah, it's been a really great opportunity for me to share a side of my story and my experience. And some people think you have to have this difficult childhood to have this primary lie or this thing, this unworthiness, this not enough conversation going on. It comes from having a poor childhood. I think everybody as children, we have this primary lie that we're told or that we derive from what happens around us, the meaning that we give things. And it drives the rest of our lives. And at the core, it is the same for everybody, but it'll look differently based on personality and experience. It's the not enough conversation. I'm not smart enough. I'm not important. I'm insignificant. I'm entitled. All those things really stem from a not enough conversation.
Let's debunk that myth a little bit because I had a similar upbringing. My parents were busy and successful and present, and I had a good childhood. School was easy for me. I was good at sports. I'm completely with you there. And is it most people think or assume that when you have issues like this, and I'll call them issues because we all have issues, right? But that sounds worse than I mean it. But when you have this challenge, when you have this limiting belief, when you have this thing emotionally or psychologically that's holding you back, people presume that it's because something happened to you, or there was a big event, or you weren't loved. Or so debunk that myth for us and help us understand why high achievers have just as many issues as everybody else. Right before we jumped on this podcast, I recorded another one, and it was another woman who worked with high earners and high achievers. And she talked about how most of them are hot messes. And it's like, just because you're a high achiever, just because things come easy to you, just because you're talented or excel in things that other people struggle to be good at, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have all these lies and you don't have all these fears and conditioned beliefs.
Yeah, I think it's human nature. If you look on a spiritual level, I do believe there's that good energy or that goodness, and then there's also the not so good or the evil, which another podcast right there, just talking about that. So we don't go into too much of that.
We've got like a whole series already of future podcasts.
I'm just kidding. It's like I'm opening up the can of worms here, talking about some of these things and great topics. But just to kind of summarize it, there is the good and the evil in my mind, or the good and the bad. The negative, the positive, unity is plural, minimum of two, as one of my mentors would say. So, if you think of, when you're kids, when we're children, we are so open to learning. We model, we listen, we imitate. And so we're just like these, like this sponge, and we have these life experiences. And so it doesn't have to be one significant big thing that happened, perceived as big thing that happened, for us to derive meaning from our experiences. A lot of times it's those little things that build up. So high achievers, they have the same experience, right? There's certain things that they learn, the meaning. Tony Robbins says nothing has meaning except the meaning we give it. And that's where I think it's almost like the angel and the devil. It's like the devil sitting in your shoulder and saying, see, you're not worthy. You're insignificant. I talked to a lady, for example, who has been struggling in her career and struggling to make a go of it in her relationship and all the areas of life. She's in her mid-50s, and did a complimentary coaching session with her. So I didn't know her at all. And I had 1 hour to figure out what was going on, what was holding her back. And so we got to this really quickly, that her parents, her father in particular, had very high expectations for her. So he was a strong personality. She was also born many, many years after her siblings. She was kind of a surprise. It came out, much later. And so all her siblings were older. And so they would have these conversations, innocuous conversations, just conversations, right? But because she was young and because she didn't understand what they were talking about at the time, what she derived from that is that she was insignificant. And so when we pinpointed it and said, oh, that's where it came from, a little thing, right? Having a conversation, and then having her dad saying, come on, you don't understand, or you don't understand, you're too young to understand. And for her going, oh, okay. So she interpreted that as, I'm insignificant, I'm too young to understand, I'm not smart, all these things. And how that played out in the rest of her life is she would hide. She would avoid taking on bigger opportunities because she wasn't good enough to do that. She wasn't significant enough to be valued for that. And so it plays out. So we all have those things. And the key is, I'm not a therapist, right? So it's not, you can get into all the whys and whats and all of it. I look at it from, if you can understand where it started and you can understand what it is, now you get to change it. Because the beautiful thing, we have the opportunity to change our beliefs. We have the ability to change how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we see the world around us. We get to choose those things. So a lot of successful people, for example, they are, you said, your friend said they're a hot mess. Well, it's interesting because a lot of people who are high achievers are actually trying to outrun the idea of them being not good enough and being a failure. Their fear of failing, their fear of being, and if you ask them, are you afraid of failing? Oh, no. And yet underlying it is just not enough conversation of, no, that's why they're actually trying to prove so much to themselves that they're not that, so that they try to overachieve. But then if something happens and things fall apart, their identity is all wrapped up in the success. And I've seen that where people have gone on to create massive success in a short period of time, and it became their identity. And when things started to fall apart, their identity, like their business started to fall apart, or their income dropped, their notoriety dropped, then all of a sudden it's like their whole identity crumbled because it wasn't really based from within. It was based on outside external results. And having had success in my life and also having had failures in my life, if you base your identity and you base your worthiness on external results, you will be on a roller coaster ride your whole life.
You just diagnosed basically every issue that pro athletes have and face when they come out of playing sports, because it's, talk about external validation. And even when you don't seek it, when you play at those levels, money comes fast and easy and young, and people, these kids, I just shake my head right now. It's kind of like National Signing Day time when we're recording this. And you see these kids that are like posting on Twitter to like 10,000 people that today I'm going to make the decision of where I go to college. And it's just, this whole perception and identity and value and belief in yourself coming from one thing that you achieve. And kind of on my soapbox about sports, because that's the business is a little more sustainable. Sports at some point, no matter how great you are, is going to come to an end because it's a physical thing, and we get old and our bodies quit. So anyway, kind of go off on a little tangent there.
To that point though, every business at some point comes to an end. Every career at some point comes to an end, right? We are not our business. Now, businesses can be passed on, sold, and so forth, but ultimately there's a beginning and an end to it, right? So it's still a concern you're absolutely right. With sports athletes, they know they have a shelf life, right? And it's a much shorter shelf life than business.
Well, they should know they have a shelf life. Some of them act because they're young, like they're invincible, like we all did when we were young. So,
I thought I was invincible when I was in my 20s. Sure. Working night and day. And yeah.
I want to get back to your story and just the 3 things that you did to pull yourself out of the funk. And then I want to pivot to kind of how, as a dad, I'm sitting here like kind of terrified, like how do we model better behavior, and how are we more self-aware of those instances where something can be internalized even though we don't mean it that way?
3 things that, and I love giving credit where credit is due, where I learned it from people. I've had some wonderful mentors, and part of my success and what I've learned from other people, which, like they say, there's no self-made millionaires, there's no self-made successes. One of the people that I studied and went through a 1-year program with Tony Robbins, and it is a strategic intervention program with the Robbins But Honest training. So I learned this from him through that program, and then have kind of adapted it. If you want to change the way that any experience in your life, you want to exchange your experience of life, right? And how you feel in a moment, you want to get yourself out of a funk, is to do 3 things. So first of all, change your words, change your focus, and change your state. Now, these are the same 3 things that I use with my clients, and I teach my clients to apply in any area, ultimately in any area of life, is to recognize what are the words you say. Our words create our world. So what do we say to ourselves? And to your point about being a father, what do you say to your children? You can't prevent your children. There's things, you're not going to be perfect. None of us are perfect. And even if you were the quote unquote perfect dad, there are things that you're going to say to your children, just like my parents absolutely loved me and supported me. And yet I still had an interpretation based on some of the life experience I had that I was not important enough, right, to come and take a day off and go. And that wasn't true. It's a total lie. And my parents were the biggest supporters. I've always said my dad was my biggest cheerleader. So even if you do everything quote unquote perfectly, there's still the interpretation. And it's what you do with that interpretation, recognizing, becoming aware of it. And you can hear it in their words. You can hear it in their language, the things they say about themselves, the things they say about others, the things that they repeat. So words are really powerful. Changing your focus. What we focus on expands. It's a nice cliche, and most people have in the personal development world have heard that, and yet don't really know the extent of which you can apply that, right? So everything, if you focus on being hungry, you're going to be more hungry. If you focus on being annoyed, you're going to get more annoyed. If you focus on not wanting to be in debt anymore, what are you going to get more of? More debt. If you focus on, I don't want to be a failure, or I don't want to look bad, then what's going to happen? So changing your focus from the not wanting to have, or the fear, and there's really only everything we either coming from a place of love or fear at any given moment. So asking ourselves, where is this coming from? So focusing on love, focusing on abundance. So it's the abundance and scarcity, right? Changing your focus. What are you focusing on? As an entrepreneur, I know, having worked with literally thousands of entrepreneurs over the years, a lot of times they focus on not failing. They focus on, if it is to be, it's up to me. I can't find good people. I have to work hard to be successful. The economy is a tough economy. People looking for jobs. It's hard to find good jobs out there. If you don't know somebody, it's all about who you know. These are all beliefs that, that you can buy into, and your reality, it will shape your reality. So change your words, change your focus, and change your state, which Tony really talks a lot about, the physiology, changing your physical state. Because we can recognize if somebody's depressed, you can recognize them without them opening their mouth or saying anything to you. You know whether or not somebody's depressed or not. So in the same way, you can tell if somebody's confident. You can notice in yourself, wow, how am I feeling right now? If I'm tense, you're constantly, your shoulders are tight and your body is amazing. It is, I had somebody on my podcast at one point, Philip Shepard, and he talks about the intelligence of the body. Your body will tell you what's going on, give you a clue as to what's going on in terms of from an emotional standpoint. Louise Hay wrote a book called You Can Heal Your Life, and said, if you're experiencing this illness or this symptom, then consider that this is the emotional correlation. This is the root emotion that causes that. And so you can now change your emotion. How do you change your emotion? People say, okay, well, I recognize it. What do I do with it? You change your words, change your focus, and change your state.
I love that. A little bit of sports psychology I learned back in the day, and it goes with the focus examples that you gave, but your brain doesn't understand negative words. And so if you're a golfer out there, and you play on that par 3 where it's, there's water on one side and desert in my world, I guess, on the left. And you say, don't hit it in the water. All your brain hears is water. It's the same thing in the way that we talk to ourselves. Instead of saying, don't hit it in the water, say center of the green. And that's what your brain will focus, and your subconscious will work, assuming you have some inkling of how to hit a golf ball, to make sure that that's the outcome you get versus the don't hit it in the water and your brain fixates on water and where does the ball go? So it's all of my kind of like psychological tips have this sports application to it, but it's been fun as I've gone from collegiate and pro athlete into business, how important that background in mindset and peak performance training as an athlete has been to my ability to push through the inevitable ups and downs in entrepreneurship. So let's talk about entrepreneurship as a mindset. All those things you just talked about are super relevant, whether it's an entrepreneur or whether it's someone who's just building a career inside the corporate world. Where do you see people trip up with their mindset outside of those? Those are 3 solutions. But where do you see people get stuck or pull themselves down or give into their conditioned beliefs?
First of all, when you're talking about sports psychology, then you'll appreciate Blair Singer, one of my mentors that I learned a tremendous amount from. He loves sports to that point. He says business and life, but business is an emotional contact sport. And what's interesting, just on that note, when you're talking about the golfer not focusing on the water or the wherever, focus on where center of the green. You notice there's like a beginner's luck. Oftentimes people say, wow, how'd you do that? Right? It's because they were almost too stupid to know not to focus on all the other things. Right? So sometimes we get so smart. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders that get to the point where they almost know too much. In knowing too much, you can know what you're supposed to watch out for and what to focus on. And sometimes, having that innocence of not knowing all those factors that you got to watch out for in business. It's like people say, you got to watch out for this. To your point about entrepreneurship as a mindset, you say, we got to watch out for those, scammers. Got to watch out for people that are going to take advantage of you. All these things that we develop based on experience. So if somebody had an experience and they said, mental note to self, watch out for people there's a lot of people like that in the world, and we, to be careful. And that becomes a challenge because then you become cynical. And so one of the challenges as an entrepreneur and somebody who's been in business for a number of years is to not be cynical about who people are and how the world operates, because there's a lot of scarcity. The prevalent mindset is scarcity. Don't miss out. You're FOMO, right? So fear of missing out. If you don't buy this product, you're going to fail. if you buy this product, this is going to happen to you. If you buy this beer, then, you're going to have all these beautiful women. I've never seen that happen quite like that, but it's great for marketing.
Typically, the more beer you drink, the further women want to get from you.
Right. It's like you have a beer belly. Okay. But see, here's the thing is marketers do that and they feed on that fear because it's so ingrained in us. That's something to notice and saying, wow, so it's not about if, it's about, okay, how do we change it? I also talk about entrepreneurship as a mindset, meaning that whether you work for someone else or whether you have your own business or you're unemployed looking for a job, I always see there's a guy who wrote a book called, Burke Hedges wrote a book called You Inc. Many years ago, read it and just totally resonated with it. And I believe that everybody owns a company called You Inc. You are your own corporation, whether you actually have a registered legal entity or not. You are your own corporation. So when you go to look for a job, you are selling yourself to a client. The reason why I say that is because I think that coming back to the whole idea of identity, there's so many people becoming entrepreneurs nowadays, and they're seeing themselves as an entrepreneur as a business, right? They're seeing it as an external thing, right? I own this business. Now I'm an entrepreneur. It's like having identity of something that they are doing, not about who they're being. And entrepreneurship, in my mind, is a way of being. It's a lifestyle. It's a way that you show up in the world. Ownership, taking responsibility, no matter if you work for somebody else or not. I remember I've always had my own business, but I worked with a group of lawyers for a number of years on a project. It was supposed to be short-term and then ended up to be many years. I did very well there. And the reason why I did well was because I treated it, I knew they were their clients, of course, but I treated it like my own. And as a result of that, I looked at things differently. And I think that if more people would look at things as though they truly were owning it. And the reality is, even though those were not my clients, what I owned was my reputation. I owned my character. I owned what I was known for. And that's far more important to be looking at than, what my job description said. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really good management/leadership tip in there too, to empower your team, to empower every employee or every partner or stakeholder in your business, whether it's your own or whether it's your company, to feel empowered, to give them some kind of leeway and trust and confidence that let them handle it like it's theirs. It's amazing. My corporate background was in sales, and the amount of money that salespeople would spend when it was a corporate credit card versus when they had to front it and get reimbursed was like staggering. So when you give people ownership, or when you let them have some kind of control to operate their business or their book of business as if it were their own, great things happen. That happens for entrepreneurs. That happens for people. So if you're a manager out there, or if you have influence over some managers, remind them or challenge them on how they are empowering their people to behave in a way that brings out those qualities where people would drive and make decisions in the best interest of something long-term that they own, rather than just being a rented talent person inside of an organization.
Absolutely. Well, and even it doesn't mean that you're not managing them or leading, but there's also a big difference between managing people and leading. Managing is kind of like you're maintaining what is. And leading is expanding that out, right? It's having a vision moving forward towards something and bringing people along with that. So it's not about not leading them or leaving them to do their own thing. Obviously, you're going to check in. But if you look at Ritz-Carlton would give their people a budget and saying, you have the freedom to make a decision to please a customer, an unhappy customer. You have a certain amount of money that you can use up to that amount to do whatever it takes to satisfy that customer.
It's funny you bring that up. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Donald Miller from StoryBrand, and he has the co-founder of Ritz on, and he's talking about that very thing. And it's $2,000. I only know that because I listened to it literally at the gym this morning. But those employees, everybody from and the example he gives in the podcast was incredible. He's like, if I'm a server at the restaurant and you say good evening or good morning, how have you enjoyed your stay? And well, actually, my toilet won't flush. They empower that server to solve that problem and say, let me apologize, sir, and I'd like to buy your breakfast for you this morning. It's an incredibly simple on the surface thing to do, But what's fascinating about that, to go completely into management for a minute, is the processes that they put around those outcomes. So you've got to have this belief, then you've got to have it culturally adopted, and then you've got to put processes in place that actually make it so. It's an incredible thing if you're a business geek and like management stuff and just want to learn about cool brands. Check out that podcast. So I totally derailed that, but that's the number.
But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a mindset. You were asking about entrepreneurship as a mindset. It's giving them, empowering them. It's a culture. It's more than just saying, hey, by the way, everybody, you got $2,000 to do, whatever it takes to satisfy a customer. It's the culture that has to be in place in order for that to work, which is where the magic is. I was talking to somebody earlier today, a client, I was explaining, look, there's a big difference between having a team and having a whole bunch of individuals working under one roof. And most companies, what they have, they think they have a team. Hey, team, like, let's go here. Let's do this. And, this is our vision. This is our strategy. This is where we're going this year. And people go, okay, sure. But then they may even give them lip service there and saying, oh, that's a great idea. And they walk out the door and say, he's an idiot. What is he thinking? Right. Or they just don't do it. And if you don't have the buy-in, then the results don't follow. And then they wonder why. And they say, we can't find good people, and these people won't do what they're supposed to do. And it's their fault. So that's where we get to take ownership and saying, you know what, it's my responsibility. If it is to be, it's up to me in that sense of I'm going to take 100% responsibility for, the outcome, whether it's working or it's not working. It's like, I got to look at that and saying, where can I, and leaders are at any level in the organization. So that's another mindset piece, right? Are you treating it like you're the leader? Well, I'm just the guy in the back shipping dock. I mean, what am I doing? I'm not a leader. Well, you are. You're leading yourself in You Inc. So how are you showing up on that back shipping dock, right? And how many times have we heard stories of people that have been doing a menial or routine task or factory work or something like that and have shone and actually set an example for the people and raised the standard for the people around them and have gotten noticed because of that. But even if they don't get noticed, it plays out. How we do anything is how we do everything. It plays out with what they teach their kids, the legacy they pass on to their children, their friends. They get known for showing up that way. I'm going to take ownership. I value excellence. I'm going to do things with excellence to the best of my ability. And that's a mindset.
Absolutely. I love the show Undercover Boss for that reason. You find these people that are kind of caught in the background that are doing the right thing. And one day the CEO actually realizes how valuable they are and almost always gives them something that, like, every time I see that show, it like brings me to like tearing up. I'm like, oh my God, that's so awesome. But it comes down to mindset and how do you want to handle yourself? And do you believe that operating in the way that you should is going to eventually pay dividends? Is it an abundance thing, or is it one of the cliches I hate is, well, that's above my pay grade? Well, if you think about it like that, you're damn right it is. And because you'll never be in a position to impact that or make that decision. So Nicole, I appreciate all your time. We have our next 3 or 4 separate podcasts tape, but it's about time to play rapid fire. So you ready to go?
Sure.
Let's do it. What do you think about when you're alone in your car?
Ideas. Actually, it's funny because yesterday I was putting my voice recorder on and just letting it play. And I was listening to ideas, formulating, clarifying some of the ideas that are in my mind rolling around. And I just start honing in. Sorry, that sounds boring, but that's what I do. Or I play music and sing to myself, sing on my own.
It's been a while, but what's your advice for your previous boss?
Pass your learning on to the next generation of the people who work for you. Be willing to pass it on. What
do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be a loving, kind person that is known for being loving and generous and kind, and that is somebody that has made a difference in the world. Legitimately can say, when I'm on my deathbed and I look back and I say, you know what? Yeah, I made a difference.
What inspires you?
Stories of people that have overcome, that have seen beyond the struggles and been able to not just overcome in their own life, but then have been able to help other people do the same thing.
What is your biggest fear?
I worked through it recently, actually. I had some personal stuff that went on that caused that really to show up. My biggest fear was to die alone and to be, because having my marriage not work out and so forth, and my parents both pass away, I just had this big fear of just dying alone. And yeah, so.
Who do you admire the most?
Well, I would have to say, being a Christian, I would admire Jesus as an incredible example for us to follow. There's so much that you can unpack there, but nearby to my family, I would, or nearby to me, like in terms of people that I know, I would say my mother.
Which celebrity annoys you the most?
I honestly I don't pay too much attention to celebrities, and I don't waste my time on entertainment news so much, but, so they don't annoy me. I just ignore it.
How do you define success?
Doing what you love and making an impact through that and helping other people.
All right. Last one. You get to share a drink or a meal with anyone in history, dead or alive. Who is it and why?
Besides Jesus, I would say that I would want to sit down with Nelson Mandela, and I would want to ask him how he was able to be in prison for 27 years and come out in that state of love. I kind of know the answer to it, but I would just love to spend time in listening to him from his viewpoint, share how he was able to come out and empower a nation and do it in love. And I just think it's an incredible story that he has and a legacy that he left through that example.
All right, Nicole, you survived rapid fire. Congratulations.
Whew. Yeah. No preparation there. I'm like, how do I say that how you define success? Oh my goodness. That's a whole.
I have an idea. I have a little evil plan around that question several episodes from now. So I'll drop that secret someday and I'll talk about it on this podcast. But I love that. I like all these questions. Obviously I wrote them and I ask them every week, but that one in particular is one of my favorites. So before I let you go, Nicole, what's your number one parting piece of advice for my listeners, and how can we connect with you more closely online?
The number one parting piece is to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in you, all the belief from other people is not going to help. Ultimately, it comes down to how you see yourself, which is the most important. How you can reach me, you can go to discovertheedge.com. I'll actually create a separate page for your listeners, Nick, which is discovertheedge.com/transform you. So the letter U. And I'll make sure that the book is listed there. You can also reach out to me if you want to have a conversation, unpack this further. I'd be happy to do a complimentary 30-minute session and just unpack this further and see how this applies to you, whether it be in your business, in your relationships, in your health, in some area of your life which isn't working and you want it to work. Happy to talk you through with that. And so I'll make sure that's available.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And for those of you listeners who enjoyed this conversation and want to hear it flipped around, episode 222 of Nicole's podcast, Leaders of Transformation, you might recognize some guy from that episode named me. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, go check out episode 222. If you don't want to listen to that one, Nicole does an amazing job. She doesn't downplay herself or her credentials by any stretch, but she is somebody who is incredibly valuable, incredibly generous, and thoughtful with her time, and truly is about serving people and making a lasting impact and helping people transform their lives. So if you haven't followed her podcast, Leaders of Transformation, I highly suggest you check that out. If you want a place to start, check out episode 222. And Nicole, thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise and opening up and being vulnerable. I know that's not always our comfort zone as business people, but I really admire that. And I know it can help a lot of people. So thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you, Nick, for having me and asking some really good questions. You're a great host. And I'm really excited to be able to support your podcast and what you're doing. I think it really is about impacting lives. There's nothing better than knowing that you've made a difference, and you are. So thank you.
I appreciate it. We have our next several podcasts together planned, so we'll keep everybody apprised of that. But thank you again. We'll talk soon.
Look forward to it.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Nicole Jansen. Go ahead and check out her new book. I love the idea of a compilation book where it's just experts in different areas telling their own stories, one chapter at a time. Power Up Superwomen is the name of the book, and that link will be in the show notes. One last reminder, if you'd like a free copy of my best-selling book, Unboxed, an unfiltered guide to creating a career on your terms, just text Unboxed Book, all one word, to 44222, and I'll email you the MP3 file directly. At this point, we're pretty far into 2019. There's lots of fun and exciting things happening in my business. I'd love to hear what's going on in your career and in your business. So drop me a line, team@nickjmurphy.com, or hit me up on Twitter or Instagram or on Facebook. All those links every single week are in the show notes. Shoot me a follow, tag me in some of the most exciting things that you're working on. I'd love to connect with each and every one of you. That is it for this week's show. But as always, whatever you do, whatever you aspire to do, never settle. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to Transform You with your host, Nick J. Murphy. To ensure you never miss an episode, subscribe today.